The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution with which any panel member is associated. Reproduction or dissemination, other than for the purpose of education or information, without the expressed written permission of the Phoenix Research Institute or Nova Society Media is strictly prohibited. Welcome back to the Nova Society, the space where dialogue deepens understanding and civic responsibility comes to life. I'm Dr. Mark Bound, joined by my partner in crime, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and together we'll unpack the stories that matter most, exploring the headlines and history. The big ideas shaping today's conversations. Let's dive in and hear what our guests and listeners have for us today. Today on the Nova Society, we welcome Tom Joseph. He's an innovator, business owner, and social activist. He's the founder of Bookminders, a transformative approach to outsourcing bookkeeping and pioneering a remote-first employment model that prioritizes flexibility and work-life balance. As an activist and media producer, he launched Wilson's Foundation and America's Main Street Party, introducing a new method for nominating members of Congress. With a track record of leveraging technology for societal well-being, he applies a business-oriented model to election reform, and we are welcoming Tom to the podcast. We want to welcome Tom Joseph, and today we will be talking about his group, which is looking at the People's Primary, which Scott and I were reading a bit about that. We find it very interesting. We've talked about some of the components of the People's Primary in the past, as far as no money in politics, which I think everybody agrees would be a great idea. So Tom, why don't you tell us about what the People's Primary is all about and what you're doing?
Well, first off, I originally thought about starting an ideological third party and was setting about that course, doing something I thought, similar to probably, if you know anything about the Forward Party, just trying to be better about better people running for office. But to me, it was just more of the same. And one day I made a joke about we do a better job picking the next American Idol than we do the next representative to Congress. And it made me think that maybe we could stage a contest outside of the system. And because I'd already started a political party or a political committee, it can be a national party, but it's a party in name, that I figured out a way to use a political party to create an alternate primary system, because technology reduces the cost. It used to be that the government had to do something like this. We do this every day. We have contests, we use apps, we transact online, we buy things. So I started looking into creating this contest and figuring out a legal way to deliver basically competition to our public primary, because that is really the weak link in our system. Everybody gets reelected because their parties give them money and nobody can bring them down in the primary. And the only way you get a different representative in the primary is if they didn't do the party's bidding and they get primaried from the left or right, which is causing all the extremism in our system. So I wanted to figure out a way to moderate the system, and it really trying to figure out a way to break gerrymandered districts. This is something I only want to run in gerrymandered districts. Swing districts aren't that bad. The fact that they're competitive, I think, forces representation to be more moderate. And the districts are naturally uncompetitive, or probably should be that way. It's really the purpling of and bearing of votes and kind of manipulating the system that really, I think, is causing the imbalance in the system. So I wanted to figure out a way to break that. And I've figured out a way not just to use a political committee as a tech company, but to use a super PAC kind of as a marketing department for that, to use local committees as basically the operators of this contest. Like, it wouldn't, I don't think, work if we try to run this centrally. So we'd publish this app to local committees who will run the contest. We'll validate that they did correctly, but there's a check and balance between the two. The local content, locally run contest, but we'll always do an equal number of red and blue. So if we can afford to bank, 10 general election campaigns, winners, we'll do 5 red and 5 blue. If we can do 20, we'll do 10 red, 10 blue. So, and we're looking for districts, not for candidates. So we're looking for places where the numbers are right. And we think that's where the winners are winning between at least 2/3 of the vote and up to about low 80% of the vote. That there's enough opposition votes there to capture, to move that candidate into a pink or baby blue, disaffiliate them from both parties, and create pink and baby blue caucuses within the House of Representatives. That's our goal in a nutshell.
Yeah, in a nutshell. In a nutshell.
So, can we take a step back before we go forward? Tom, tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your CV? What's your background here?
I'm a native Pittsburgher. I'm an engineer. Well, how about Steelers? We just hosted the draft. I got my souvenir draft stuff here. I had my $20 drink, courtesy of the NFL. No, I'm born and raised in Pittsburgh. I have an engineering degree. I worked at Westinghouse, had a career in factory automation, and I stumbled upon an idea. This is back in, the early 80s or mid 80s when the personal computers came out, of employing mostly women because they didn't have flexible job opportunities at that time, doing accounting from home. Started a company called Bookminders. It's been, frankly, very successful. In I think 5 cities, and win awards for being a great place to work, especially for women that have flexibility. It's a professional. We're kind of a boutique bookkeeping service, but we scaled this. I've won accounting course in my life. I got a C in it, and built a really successful accounting business. But it's really about solving a problem. I think that that these folks had a work opportunity, and small businesses and nonprofit needed fractional accounting help, and we leveraged the training that we gave, that each of these women could support like 5 to 15 accounts depending on size, and became very efficient about it. And and it's something you think about what our conversation is going to do. We count, we need security. People are trying to obviously hack us all the time, and it was a really unique, I think, solution that the accountants didn't think of, but an engineer thought of. But the folks that run it, and we have an all-women management team, kind of retired me. I was not adding a lot of value. They took over. They do a great job, and I still own the company. But during the COVID, I was kind of panicked about what was going on. When I got financial help from the government, which I properly spent, I would defend how we spent our PPP money. But I do also make a promise that we pay it forward, because not only do you get to save your business, you get a tax break too. So I felt that if spending the money really wasn't enough, that I also had to spend some of my tax break. So I committed that I would put money into a committee, and I really not thinking I'd ever accomplish anything. It was one of those things you say, hey, I'm going to do this, but who's going to actually figure out how to break the two-party system? That seemed like an impossible task, but that was my goal. The mission statement that I had when I started this was to fundamentally change the relationship between politicians and money. I wanted to do something that was completely different, and I just kept thinking about it until we came up with something.
All right, very good. So you mentioned, so you take this from the tech side, and so the biggest question, I think, of any time you're going to be voting by mail is who's hacking it.
We're not voting by mail. It's going to be a totally mobile system. And we're going to use the most secure technology that's available. I was really surprised about this aspect of, there's actually 3 different secure mobile voting technologies. One's a nonprofit, 2 are for-profit, but they're in use in states. At least a handful of years ago, the government deployed this for service members who are on subs in service. They felt it was a commitment to get these out, but it is something that's encrypted, uses blockchain. It scans to make sure the person who's voting is holding the device that's secure. And it's this technology is actually in place in 7 states under a platform called the Digital Democracy Project. So that aspect of it, I think, is easily assailable. And with the fact that now there's a couple things too. This is an election system, it's a nominating system. So if you feel like our result was bad, continue to vote for Republicans and Democrats if you're happy with that. Our goal is to come up with a better primary, not a better election system, better way to nominate somebody that is actually chosen by the people. And the system we have now is terrible. And I'll go up against that. I think this is not going to be hard. I mean, I'll show you the app. It's already way better than what we have.
Well, in a lot of ways, anything would be way better than what we have right now.
Yeah. So,
yeah, I mean,
yeah, incumbency is a tough one, really hard, right? Breaking incumbents is very, very difficult, and my wife belongs to a group of women who are fighting to just support opponents of heavily entrenched members of Congress here in Connecticut, in the state of Connecticut, and fighting for them to even get on the ballot is hard to do, So I would have to say that your system probably does have a lot of merit when it comes to changing the way that states do these things. I mean, Connecticut is still a state where you have to be registered for a party to vote in the primary, which is outrageous.
See, this is how we're going to beat them, because they make it hard, and we're going to make it easy, and we're going to make it verifiable. So if we do 5 rounds, and what we're thinking is that if the contest is free and equal, then a lot of people want to do it. Let's say that there's a field of 50 to 100 candidates. Explain how this works. To get into it, not everybody, you can't just enter. You got to show that you have support. To get on the general election ballot now, you'd have to show you have signatures from people in the district. We're going to do something similar. Say, hey, to get into the contest, you got to have 100 people in your district also download the app, validate their identity, and say that they're endorsing you. So if we have 50 to 100 candidates do this, we're going to go into the contest with 5,000 to 10,000 users on the app already. And there's going to be an initial rush for these 50 to 100 candidates to make the top 20, to get now consideration. So from that standpoint, by the time the first round's over, we may have 10 to 20,000 people participating on the app. Now, your cousin doesn't make it, and the 3 people you want, are you going to drop out and not be interested? We think this is compelling. Americans love real competition. The public primary is not a real competition. The Olympics are a real competition. There's a lot of crappy sports that we all of a sudden follow every 2 years because it's compelling. You know what I mean? So we think if we have a compelling contest, use a super PAC to promote not, this ugly advertising. Just say, hey, check out the app, check out who's running for Congress, do your civic duty. And the thing that these kids came up with was really clever, this idea of having 7 issues that the local committee identifies that candidates have to weigh in on. So this way they kind of state their values, left, right, center, yes, no, on what they want to do. These are things that should be, so instead of us being 1 issue voters, maybe we could be 3 or 4 issue voters. So when you go into the app, and you can see this on our website, you answer the questions, there's a field of 100 candidates, you answer them. Now, if you're in the left district, you can see that it's a blue, you want to answer left, otherwise there's not a lot of candidates. So we made it so it'd be like sample that. But you answer these questions, all of a sudden it reduces the field down to the ones that match. When there's a field of 100, wouldn't you be happy with those 15 making it to the next round? Like, you don't even have to check them out. You just know they agree with you on your values. So you could just click a button at this point and be done and see, hey, who makes it to the top 20? Not much unlike American Idol, except for you like their singing, or you know what I mean, that they are sharing your values. Or you could go in and check their profiles out. The app is kind of working. I don't know if you have it up on the website there, but you can play with it now and see how it reduces the field. These are all AI profiles. AI doesn't produce a bad-looking candidate.
Yeah.
But we actually have, how they're speaking at microphones, and you can give you a sense of how this is going to work. This is way better than being bombarded by TV advertising. And we're also getting these constituents say, hey, wouldn't you like this to be the way it is going in the future? You want text messages and be harassed for $5 and $10 donations, or, invest in this software asset, and we'll build something that we can use over and over again, that is valuable. And I stood this up with college students and volunteer efforts from a nonprofit. Wait till we raise some money and really make this thing hum.
Well, about a month ago, we had Ramon Perez on.
Yeah, Ramon's the one that's doing the work. Yeah,
he's the one doing the, and he was telling us he's doing all the work. Anyway, you know, I like the idea because I agree with you. Everybody likes a horse race in some form or another. We are compelled to sports simply because, you're 2 games out of first place and you've got 3. I mean, it's just that it's one of those rare times when we actually pay attention to math and we say, hey, we get compelled. It's why we pay attention to the World Cup here in the United States, even though, let's face it, it's not really our sport. But my issue is that, and I think it's a great idea, but I think in a lot of ways we have to look at the system itself. Right now, each congressional district, basically, you're representing over 700,000 people. That's way too many.
I agree.
That is so too many. The original founding fathers, it was 20,000. Now we're at 700 and some odd thousand. This idea of gerrymandering that now has become this huge battle. How is taking the money out going to fix that systematic issue as far as our elections are concerned? Because I'm the first one to say, if I don't like the Congress, and nobody likes Congress, nobody, but I don't like Scott's guy more than I don't like my guy. It's all Scott's guy's fault. Not my guy's fault. It's Tom's guy's fault. How do we get past that when we're talking about the systematic issue with elections and basically the political system in the United States?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my sole focus is on gerrymandered districts. I said that, and what I think people don't realize is their vote isn't really stolen on election day. Their vote is stolen by party whips who put pressure on legislators to vote for their super packages by saying, hey, you want your reelection funds for that primary? I mean, that's where the system is broken. And that's where I'm attacking that problem. Because what I'm saying is that, to get elected, you can't have a political committee. And once you win the contest, you have the political committee. Guess who the treasurer is? The local committee. And they either spend all that money or return what's left to the nominating committee for the next election cycle. There's no war chest in our cycle. And also, none of the candidates can contribute $1 more than any other citizen. In the current system, I know they're allowed to, but we won't permit it because we're the treasurer. And we're going to basically put the rules in place to restore the controls. The only reason the system works like it does now is because we let them.
Right. So, all right. So we're talking about the primaries here, but what about the general election? Because I'm reading about, what you're trying to do here. So whenever money is involved, that buys influence. I mean, it's a political reality. If we do this at the primary level, why aren't we doing the same thing at the general election level?
Because this is, at that point, you have to get legislation passed, and that's impossible. The only thing the two parties agree on is that they don't want to change the system. I mean, They're pushing back on open primaries, on ranked choice. They want to keep super PACs. They love it because it ensures their job security. So that's my idea, is to create, if they won't fix that system, we'll create a better nominating system and elect that. And the way you break that is you have to give the public confidence that you're going to win. And the way you do that is you outdraw the public primary. That's why through 5 rounds, my goal is to get to the point where our winner wins and there's 100,000 people in the district participating, because that's about what you get in a public primary. And if we can equal or exceed the public primary, then we're going to come in as a favorite, because our guy or gal was, number one, chosen by the people, and number two, they survived a gauntlet. And the person who won the public primary, that was a Democrat or Republican, had a cakewalk. And we know that they're not that sharp. I mean, there's a lot of folks in Congress that just are there because of a family name or they had a bunch of money.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned the gerrymandered districts, and it strikes me, just thinking of this as an academic, as a college professor who's saying, I need a research project to do for my students to do, that this would be the greatest one. Because now you've got, I don't know how many, they're going to end up with how many.
Guys at Penn are doing it. I mean, I have people working at Penn and Haverford that are starting. If you got people who want to help us, we are looking for help.
All right. Who are looking for specifically at all these new gerrymandered districts, right?
Yeah, I have to analyze the numbers. We have to re-break them down. They create a big problem for us. I mean, still there's a lot to pick from, but
Uh, and
but there's
and
a very specific number that we're looking for in terms of the split between liberals and conservatives that we think works.
and then who would you need to sell this idea to at the, I guess, at the voting district level, or the I don't know, county or state, or how are you going to get this in there? Because this is the perfect time to do it, because we've got all these new districts out there
Yeah.
that need that, where the voters are basically being told you're voting this way by the parties, right?
Yeah, I mean, a miracle would have to occur for me to make the midterm cycle. Our goal for this point is to draw a contrast between how we think it can work in the future versus what they're going to experience now. For me, this is going to be about, the beta version is really just to allow people to learn about how this works and start the paradigm shift. The other purpose is that I want to get a super PAC donor. I need somebody more or less fund the contest winners, and a person that basically is in the middle saying, "Hey, I'm gonna fund blue and red equally." I'm about whoever that person is or group of people is saying that, "Hey, we're about restoring the voice. We're going to do the will of the people. We're going to back their candidates no matter who they are." Super PACs typically back either candidates or causes. This one's backing the will of the people, saying, you go through this, you follow the rules of the contest, you elevate a candidate, we're going to back them. And come up with like a common campaign across all these, whether it's 10 or 20 districts, to say, hey, it's time for change. But we're going to pick the districts. We're going to figure out, and we're not going to go where people don't want us. So there'll be market surveys. It's going to be run like a business. We'll do analysis. We'll figure out, where our test markets are. We might pick 40 and decide to go into 30. You know what I mean? And continue to whittle it down. But the goal is, at the end of the day, November 2028, is to have maybe a handful of blue, navy, or pink and baby blue candidates that penetrated, so the election of the Speaker House gets forced back into the main chamber. That would be a moderating, it would be a historic moderating event, that you had to elect the Speaker of the House in the main chamber. It would not be a party leader.
I think that Ramon, when he was on, was hoping that to really show success with what they were doing, 2 million. He goes, if we can get 2 million people involved in this, he goes, I'm happy with that. He goes, well, then we can start building upon this. But Scott makes a very good point. All politics, of course, we have national politics, but all real politics is local. Is this going to be available to like the local level as well? Like school boards and county councils and things like that, because that's really where it starts.
So the reason I'm looking at Congress is really about raising money. Because
right, sure.
There's only two things where you can prove that this disrupts gerrymandering. It's either a state legislative district or the U.S. House. And right. I think to raise the money for it, we need to get a national audience. So the idea that we're going to be in 5 or 5, it might be anywhere around the country, and also that we could have an impact on the House of Representatives, it gives a reason for every American to possibly donate $5 or $10 for this thing. So that was really the strategy behind that. But when you look at it, we're like a company, we're going to take a small demographic, 700,000, figure out how much money it takes to, saturate that audience. We don't have to go to expensive markets. We could be clever about where we're picking to make sure we're going to inexpensive markets. And we're competing against, probably House reps that haven't competed against anybody in the general elections for decades. I mean, there are, people that are in there for 30 years that are in these districts where they're winning by, they have like 2/3 to 80% of the vote. That's where we want to go. There's a ton of these districts. So it's, Scott, and then because they've been tweaked, we got to kind of figure out what the numbers really are now there.
Right. And so, I mean, I understand you're going after the Congress because that's the big stage. That's where you're going to be getting the money from. But this does sound to me like something down the road in the future
Oh, absolutely.
that we could put to local politics. And in some areas, local politics is not all about money. I'm in the upstate of South Carolina. My county, it isn't really about money. It's just about
Right.
who you know, or whatever that gets you elected. So my question is, and of course, we've been hearing an awful lot about the Forward Party. Is that, I mean, are you guys kind of in line, or is, because they're supposedly red and blue. They're the the very
That was
barely red and the baby blue, as you put it. I mean, are you guys looking at them at all?
see, to me, this is ideal for the Forward Party to participate and run their candidates through a contest where they don't have to spend the money. Or, another thing would be like a liberal that is in a conservative district that just wants to get exposure and get, their Q rating up because they want to run for something else. So I totally agree, Mark, that we want to make this configurable, that it can be used not just for, I didn't finish my point there, just for legislative, but judges. If you use approval voting and you need 8 judges and you can, use the system. So yes, we want to make it configurable so it can be used at the state level and municipal. I just think the biggest problem here is gerrymandering. And to me, that's my mission. I want to prove that we can basically break gerrymandering. See, what I think they've done is it's a bell curve. And what they've done is they've taken like a real blue or real red district, and when they put the opposition votes, they're really making it pink and baby blue. And so what you have to do is figure out a system that allows that to, if money distorts the candidate and they're on this side of the bell curve, take money out, they're at the center of the bell curve, they're now pink and baby blue. That's the theory. So if you get the numbers of participation in by mobile voting, get the numbers up, it's going to push the candidates. And my prediction is the final 4 are all going to be very similar candidates. So that the districts want certain things, and that all those candidates are going to say yes on supporting water projects and, this we want to do on Iran. They're going to agree. And it's not going to be what the typical Republican or Democrat is going to have. It's going to be a little bit more modern.
Yeah. I was thinking that I read the other day, I guess this is probably common knowledge, but I just stumbled upon it. That in Texas, the Republicans may be in trouble because one of the things they were counting on when they gerrymandered these districts are Latino voters voting red, as they did in 2024. And now, of course, they're very angry at Trump, and because of that, they're sort of sliding back to Democrats. It would be, again, that's a test case audience, bilingual.
This never happens. Like there's going to be a Democratic senator from Texas. How many times have we heard this?
We've definitely heard it, but I'm not just talking. I'm certainly not talking about the Senate. When we're talking about gerrymandered district, we're talking about congressional districts, and so representing what the needs of the community would really step up here as being like eye-opening, and oh my God, we actually can get somebody that we like to support rather than whoever the party is shoving down our throats, right? But again, this is like you're largely in sell mode right now, I think, and you've got to sell this concept to local districts who are unhappy with the choices that they've gotten so far, and don't feel represented. It's you're going to have to obviously go past the parties or around them. And
I mean, totally.
Yeah,
we're not counting on it. And people that are staunch Democrats and Republicans probably won't even download the app. I mean, the one thing you have to give Trump credit for, he brought people off the bench. And, I think for real political change to occur, we're going to have to bring people off the bench. Young voters, people disenfranchised,
right.
People want to see change. People have been gerrymandered, don't show up for votes. That's a lot of numbers. Re-engaging people can do a lot. Convincing entrenched politicians to change their mind, or people that are so supportive of their brand that they watch in their channel every day, that's not going to happen. So, that's the reality of it. And I understand that. My analogy is that the two parties are monopolies, and that monopolies don't go down to conventional competition. They figured out how to defend against the forward party, frankly. What they haven't figured out how to defend is against me. They have a different system, somebody that is coming in with a completely moneyless system. And think about it. Their advantage is money. We take it away, and that is actually our advantage. And if the people at the end of the day recognize that that nominee is theirs and that other nominee is not theirs, I think they could win without the super PAC.
Yeah, yeah. We've had a couple of people on. One of the suggestions was, don't put a D or an R after their name. Just have the name up there, not letting anyone know whether they're Republican or whether they're Democrat. And it sounded like a simple idea, but it really does make some sense.
Well,
I mean, Scott has always said that, back in 2016, the Democratic Party basically shoved Hillary Clinton down our throats. And that's what we're stuck with. We're stuck with that system where, you're voting in a primary. It gives you the illusion of having some power, but the bottom line is that you really don't, because you're stuck with the political class we've got. And let's face it, if there's one thing we definitely need, is a better political class. Yeah. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, they're very stale. And the one thing I want to make is that in the nominating system, you are not allowed. We will accept, obviously, the Republican, Democrat, but they have to identify the caucus. I mean, we want to break the bind of the caucuses at a party level. So if somebody's going to come into the system as a Democrat, number one, they can't have a committee. They're allowed to come in as a Democrat, but they have to come in as a progressive Democrat or a problem solver Democrat. They have to define which caucus, because actually voters do need clarity about where your representative is going to caucus. If they just go as an independent, they have no power. And we don't want them to affiliate with party. We want them to affiliate with caucus. Who are they going to work with when they get Congress? So that is going to be something as part of the criteria, them filling out their information, is they have to identify which caucus they'll sit with.
That kind of reminds me of, Scott, when we had Travis Miserel on, and he is from the Futures Now Coalition.
Yep.
And he basically has the same, generally the same kind of concept. And again, like I say, if there's one thing that we have not learned over the past 10 years, we definitely need to make some changes to our political system, because people are not getting represented. Yeah. They're not getting represented enough. And I guess my question is now Florida is beginning to talk about redistricting, about, creating more maps. If they keep doing this, is that going to be a benefit to you, do you think? Or do you think it's going to be a hindrance to you if they just keep this cycle up where states are saying, okay, that state did it, now I'm going to fight back, we're going to do it? How does that play in with what you guys are doing now?
My theory is that the ideally gerrymandered district actually is set up so that if it happens to be that there was two blue candidates in a blue district, they can split the vote and still win. Meaning that the parties recognize that they don't want to leave themselves open. So that 2/3 number is not an accident. It's intentional. They realize that if they have this, and they give a chance for the other person to win in the general. So they're looking for a certain number. And it's interesting. I think the Republicans' number is a little bit lower than the Democrats' number, because I went and looked at all the representatives that were over the age of 70. It was interesting. You could chart them, and it was almost like they have a formula of what they want these people to win by. And so that's what we look for, is that kind of split in the district. So I think it helps us. If they continue to do it, it just gives us more markets. My election attorney, the first one I had when we were discussing this idea, and he was a Democrat and party loyal, and he's trying to figure out how to break this idea. And he said, well, the only way you can kind of defeat this is to ungerrymander the district. Because think about it, if you're in a naturally, if you're a naturally uncompetitive district, that means that you're with like-minded people, right? Would you want your legislature to put a bunch of people that were not like-minded into your district? The only reason they do it is because the system's unfair. If the system was fair, you'd never want that. It's hard for us to wrap our heads around this idea that, these things are absolutely crazy that we do.
Oh, No, no. Tom. That's one thing. It's really not hard to do. I have Lindsey Graham I have to deal with, so no.
Okay.
Yeah, I fully get that. So, my another question I have is, of course, you're not a party. This is more of a concept of how
Well,
to
so we are
conduct
a
elections.
527 committee. We actually are a political committee. We are on our way to becoming a recognized party. I mean, we're doing the things we
So
need to
you're going to
do.
have candidates
Yeah,
in the future.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right. Oh,
No. We are. So a little bit of background on this. So when I had this idea about the American Idol thing, I formed another entity called Wilson's Fountain, and Wilson's Fountain did the research behind this idea. I hired a couple of guys who are now in law school, one at Penn, one at Temple, but they're graduating poli-sci at Penn and had interest in law. So they researched the federal election code, and they actually went in and made sure that my idea of what we could do with the super PAC was legal. My idea of what we could do with the national party to make it qualify as a national party was legal and that it could be done. That we were doing with the local committees was legal, and what we were doing with the candidate committees was legal. And they went through this. You can go on wilsonsfountain.us under the research. Operating Wilson's Fountain under the Federal Election Commission regulations is what it's called. But basically, it's the manual of what we need to do to stay compliant. And I've had this checked out by multiple attorneys. Coincidentally, our attorney now went Penn undergrad, Harvard grad, or Harvard JD. And but a lot of people, election credentials looked at this, have not seen any hole in it. And this loophole's really simple. It's like, as long as these folks don't spend money, it's what we're doing is legal. And if they spend money, we kick them out of the contest. And it's pretty easy to see, if somebody runs an ad, we know it,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, or yard sign. So the rule is no physical evidence of a campaign and you stay in the contest. And you can use social media, you just can't pay for it. If the press does an article on you, hey, that can ask free press, but you can't pay for somebody to do an article on you.
I'm missing something here. I'm taking this from a marketing standpoint more than any other. You've got to market this where you're going to market it. You mentioned before the Problem Solvers Caucus, and I would think, okay, again, that there's an opening there, right? Because these are people who are supposed to be so on the level that they're not staunchly political. They're not ideological. They're not entrenched in that philosophy. I still trying to figure out how you're going to get this in, how you're going to make this happen, and that's the part that I can't quite figure out.
Well, like I said, we're gonna, like, from a marketing standpoint, if you have a new product, you'd look at different demographics and you'd figure out what's the best place to do this based on where your odds are that it's going to be successful. So through number one, the statistics, figuring out where there's a lot of gerrymandered voters. One, we know that that's very likely that we're going to be able to attract that 20 to 30% of voters to now engage in this system. One, because they hate the other party. And they just for the revenge factor. So that's a marketing angle that we have. And then there's all the dissatisfied people within current parties. A lot of dissatisfied people. Like I said, the Fox News and the MSNBC people that are, watching that 24/7, we're probably very unlikely to pull them off the bench. But we're going to use the super PAC to be the marketing department. That is going to be part of the job of the super PAC, not just to back the candidates, but to market the contest. To, in advance of the contest, come in and say, hey, contest is coming. We need volunteers for the local committee. We need people to be candidates. And if you're going to be a candidate, this is what to do and the rules. And here's the website you go to learn about it. But they'll have time then to go in, set up their campaigns. We'll get the committee organized. Hey, we may not win the first year, but we'll be there. The second, people learn this. And, just like other reality contests, if it's a good one, I think it'll become more popular. The current reality contest we have is a nightmare, and that's why nobody wants to watch.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And you mentioned less expensive districts earlier, right? And I was thinking about these rural places where you really have a hard time, getting out there and meeting people. You have to have these town hall meetings. People have to drive 20 miles to get there, and that sort of thing. And so that seemed to be another angle where you could really market this idea. And since we happen to live in an environment where people think that their uninformed ideas are just as good as really informed ideas, you would probably have an easier time raising more candidates, because there's got to be other people out there who are going, you know what? Why not run for Congress? Why not run for local office here? And I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And this is gonna tear down the barriers that you would ordinarily have for it.
Yeah, and I've talked to a lot of folks who've had experience with people, been elected to their first state legislature or local, and they said the party leaders come in, sit them down, and say, "Hey, we'll let you know when you're going to vote, and what you're going to vote for." They're like, "What?"
Wow.
And I think that this is part of the problem in the system, and this happens all up and down the chain, is that nobody wants to become part of the system, and if we can present something, say, "Hey, you don't have to raise money. You don't have to, you can go just work for the citizens. They don't like what you do, you probably won't get elected, but if they like what you do, you got a huge advantage coming in. You said you'd vote this way on these 7 things, and you did, and that's what you were asked to do. You did your job." So, it's a system of accountability. We don't have that now, and that's why, frankly, everything's messed up. If you worked at a company and you were never held accountable for your job, I mean, that company is probably going out of business.
Probably. So explain to our listeners, because I'm reading your on the site and a little bit about you. 5-round approval voting system. First of all, where'd you come up with the number 5, and what exactly will that look like through the app?
Sure. And you can, by the way, if you go to the page A Brand New Way, there's a 1-minute video that kind of gives a high level of how this works. But we actually have the app in its rawest form. I'd have to step through it with you just to show. The first 3 rounds are approval voting. And what approval voting is that you can vote for as many people as you approve of. And that works ideally with this idea that you're going to go in and you're going to identify your 3 or 4 issues, find the 15 or 20 candidates that match with you and say, "Gee, I hope a lot of them make it to the top 20. Because it's just too many people to look through. We have to have a filtering way to filter these down to a top 20. We don't have Simon Cowell to go through all these candidates and figure out which one's singing the best. So,
to be clear, Tom, this is ranked choice.
No. Approval voting is you get to vote for as many people you approve of. So you could go in and say, "Hey, I'm going to put these 3 or 4 issues in." It comes back with 20 or you could just, if you have all the time, you go through all 100 and approve this person, not approve. But basically, if you wanted to approve of all 100, you could do it. Approval voting, there's no limit. This is the thing. I didn't even know this when I started this project, what approval voting was. But it's, it's really what a reality contest is doing. They're letting you dial all the different lines. Now we're going to only let people, vote once, but once for each candidate, down to the top 4. So we go from the field, whatever size that is, down to a top 20, down to a top 10, down to a top 4. And part of this is to get an audience to that just like a reality show, if there's 10,000 to begin with and 20,000 to the top, then it's going to be, I think we're going to build an audience. I don't know if it's going to be 40, 50, 60, 70,000, but this is something that's on the line, and people are choosing, and there's a real system. But when we get to a top 4, we want to have what we're calling a virtual town hall, that the local committee will be able to introduce new questions. Still, these will be video-only responses. So each of the last 4 candidates might do an additional, 3 or 4, 30 or second or 1-minute spots, but to give more content for the constituents to consume. Again, they aren't going against each other yet. And in this round, we're still not sure, but our straw man is that we do what we're calling a forced rank choice, meaning that you have to rank all 4. And you really only have to rank, all 3, your top 2, and once you pick the 3rd, the 4th is the 4th. And use the rank choice to pick the top 2. So if that, going from 4 to 2 is kind of tricky. If you let people vote for 1, there's this whole, thing about first past the post is not good voting. So we can, use this as a sandbox. We can try ranked choice. Actually, with the beta, we're going to put all 4 methods in: star, ranked choice, approval, and what I'm calling the Panera method, which is pick 2. I made that one up.
Pick two. I like it. I like it. I
But
like
who knows?
that a lot.
And it'd be interesting. Today academics are be making these decisions. How about we let the constituents and users tell us what they like? So I want to do this. Like a business person would put an app out. They'd figure out what the users want, and so we'll have time to test it and run it through it. But the notion is that we'll have the final two. There'll be a debate. Now they'll be able to say why me over them. It won't get personal until this very last round. But I think they got to earn the spot.
Right.
But we'll moderate that. I want to moderate this debate in a way that's not done. Like it's like you get 30 seconds. This other person can't step on you or walk behind you or do. You know what? It's going to be a very clear debate. You got a 1 minute response. Boom, you're done. Your mic's cut. Do it fair.
Right.
And then let the voters choose who's the nominee. I think at this point, they're going to have the support of the district. And I think the top two are going to be very similar candidates. If the one couldn't do it, I think, if Miss America can't serve the duty and go through, we'll have the other person run because I think that the values will be very similar to the top two, probably the top four.
So do you think this is going to create a lot more interest in voting? Because let's face it, here in the United States,
Yes.
the percentage of people that vote is almost dismal when we look as compared to other nations. In Hungary, they just elected a new prime minister there in a new government, and it was like 89% of the country voted. We never get to that ever. How would this maybe promote more people being involved? Because I think one of the biggest problems we've got is that we don't have enough people involved because they say my vote doesn't count, number one. And it goes to the old adage, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Usually it's the people that are talking the loudest and being obnoxious and whatever. They're the ones that people are listening to. And people just get tired of this process and what goes into it. So
yeah.
So do you think this would maybe get more people involved because you're basically taking a lot of that out?
I'm trying to eliminate it all. I mean, we want this to be an opt-in experience, but they have to opt in, and I think that's the trade-off. It's like, hey, if you're sick of the text messages and the lousy ads, then engage, and we will do public service announcements, and we're trying to get the word out through podcasts and that. But I'm not doing junk email. I'm just not, and that's just more of the same. And I think one thing I learned from my business, you got to wear your values. So if you're saying that this campaign is not going to consist of junk email, I can't start off with junk email. But I'm going through people like you, who are people that are opting in to tune in, and
Right.
I have to keep working my way up the chain and get to bigger and bigger audiences. But I agree with you, Mark. People have to re-engage. I think the system we have is awful, but they're just voting. This is a nominating system where people are actually going to be able to see content, and it's going to be easy, and it's going to be something that they're probably more used to experiencing in their day-to-day life, and voting now just seems like this step back in time.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of things about the United States, about the American voting system that is, let's face it, are antiquated. It's from a time that's long past. I still can't figure out why we still vote on a Tuesday with 330 million people, and we're going to vote on Tuesday during a work day. And we only go till 9 o'clock at night. It's like, really? I mean, that kind of, we seem to do everything we can to make voting just not accessible. And I think something like this does help make it accessible. You feel involved.
They're still going to have to register, like for our system.
Oh, yeah.
We're just going to make sure that they actually are the right age and they live in the district. We're not going to filter out felons if they shouldn't be. I mean, I get back to what James Wilson really felt, who wrote the Constitution and authored the Free and Equal Election Clause. He was the person who felt like all people should vote. And I wonder in a day like today whether James Wilson would think maybe high schoolers should vote too, because they're dying in classrooms. And, if we use the logic to say that these guys fight for our country and they die at 18, right now people are dying in classrooms. So maybe they should weigh in on who represents them.
Very, very good point there. Very, very good point there. Scott?
Well, you PR people have to get you on like the Smirconishes and the, the Sunday morning talk shows and things like that.
It's so funny. My intern, who's at Haverford, lives 2 blocks from where Michael's from Mercantile Studios, and his roommate is interning there. And we're trying to get on his show. So I actually have a pitch that I'm working on right now to do that. But now that the app is like demonstrable, and that we really have something we can show, we want to see if Michael will give us some attention. But you're right that I think those folks, especially like he's the guy stuck in the middle, right? So, and that's
Right.
exactly where we're going. But we don't really see, like I said, a third faction. To me, it's hard to see a purple faction. I see, one pink faction, one baby blue faction that's not financially tied to either major party, that they can basically operate independently. So if you get even a few of those going, that's something. But if we could get 20 on each side, then I think now those folks could actually push for real election reform, and try to. I joke that this should be the party to end all party. We put the market pressure on to put the public primary out of business and force them to create a better one.
But we're not Smirconish, nor are we Joe Rogan, but our 100,000 subscribers, I'm sure, and believe me, Tom, we had no idea it was going to grow like that. That surprised us probably more than anybody else. So it is the people's primary. That is the idea. The idea is the Olympic trials for selecting the people to go into Congress, and it is an app that we suggest that everybody check out. The website is mainstreetparty.org, nominating process. That will be also up on the website. Tom, we wish you all the best of luck, man. It sounds like a great idea, and I really do hope that it can take off and people get interested, because this is the way you're going to elect your people to represent you, and a better way has got to be found.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's
I encourage if you could go to the website, we have a change.org petition. You can find the link there. One way to show traction is that people sign that petition. We'd love donations, of course, to take money to do this, but it's really important that people hear the word, try it out, learn about it, tell their friends, and that we show traction.
Okay, so let me just make sure that I've got this right, because your website is mainstreetparty.org/nominating-process. So they go to that, and if they go to digitaldemocracyproject.org, are they going to be basically seeing the same thing as far as the app?
No. Ramon's effort's a little bit different. I mean, Ramon's really about the Digital Democracy Project is about legislation that voters can weigh in on to their legislators. It's very important that the legislator know that known people are telling them how to vote. And his numbers are that, for the legislatures to know that there's enough people in their district that are weighing in, that it actually influences their vote. We want to use some of the underlying technology he's using, like votes, to link into our contest, which sits on top of that. And he's helped us stand up the app and get this beta version out.
Right. That's what I was at. They're two different apps for two different purposes. But it's
his app is really on the back end. Once people are elected, giving them input about how people feel in legislation. Ours is on the front end. It's like, how do we nominate better people who actually listen to the input that Ramon's having? Because still, money has a huge influence on how these folks vote. So even though the people, we know this, they put party over country, if we can make the change on the front end, now you can hold them their feet to the fire on the back end.
It sounds like these two would work really well together in conjunction with each other. Yeah.
I thought it would be something we would eventually do. And then I ran into Ramon. I was like, oh my God, we can complete the loop. And no, seriously. And but anyway, mainstreetparty.org, a brand new way is under that nominating process. And that's describes, the three main steps, the three endorsement rounds, the virtual town hall, and then the debate round.
All right. And we will have a link to that in the description of this episode. Tom, very great pleasure talking to you. We wish you all the best.
This is great. I almost forgot we were on a podcast, just like a conversation.
When this comes out, because we do get emails about specific questions from people that we have on. If I get a bunch of specific questions, can we have you back on? You can address them from our listeners.
And when you have me back on, the app will probably be working like where we could you really get a better feel for it.
We can play
I
with
want to have it work. It's like you basically, I want to go to the next round. Then you see, right now, I have to show you how we can do it, but it's kind of behind the scenes. But
Right.
we're going to have it that people can basically step through all 5 rounds and repeat it for a red district and a blue district.
Cool. Very, very cool.
So,
Thanks, Tom.
Hey, great time.
And that's all the time we have for today's episode. The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We want to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing team, Apple Podcasts, the largest source of podcast and music online, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your destination for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. And most importantly, we want to thank you, our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society could not be possible. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing on the platform of your choice. It's easy, it's free, and helps our channel grow. For questions or comments, you can reach us at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So on behalf of Dr. Scott Gershwer and all of our production partners here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power of society is knowledge. Thank you for listening, and we hope to see you again next time.